everybody. This is Matt Valley bringing you another episode of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the research and insight pros that you trust on a daily basis. Today's guest is Brian Hughes, who has spent the last 20 years or so in media research with IPG agencies, first with Initiative, and for the last 15 plus years at MAGNA, where he is currently the Executive Vice President and Managing Director of Audience Intelligence and Strategy. But Brian is a Brooklynite, and if there's one thing I know about a lot of Brooklynites that I know, they play in bands, man. And Brian is no exception. But the cool thing about Brian is that his band had a name that was very apropos of a career in research and insights, and I'll let Brian tell you all about that. So welcome to the show, Brian.
Welcome. Thank you, Matt, and thanks for having me. I was, as I mentioned when we spoke initially, I was super excited to find out that there was a podcast where my two sort of quote unquote careers came together. So it's great to be here.
Cool, good. I'm glad to hear that. First, let me say that I don't believe you that you've spent 20 years at IPG. You've aged well, shall I say?
I appreciate that. I'll take it.
Cool. All right, so let's start there. So you've been at IPG, and that's kind of a rarity, right? Spending 20 years with the same employer.
Yeah. As I understand it, it is pretty rare in this business. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of cool when you encounter it. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this space and how you landed at IPG and how you've sort of progressed along the way.
Sure. I mean, I'd be lying if I said it was completely intentional. So I graduated with a degree in writing for media, which is a little bit nebulous, as you might imagine. And, there was a time where I had kind of envisioned myself writing movies and stuff. And then, when I actually tried to write a screenplay and realized how hard it was, I'm like, I don't know. And so when I first graduated college, I didn't really know what to do yet, and I didn't have a lot of prospects in terms of jobs. So I kind of just did some manual labor stuff for a while, and then leveraged the alumni network from my alma mater, which is Syracuse. Mm-hmm. And found this position working at Telerep, which is a rep firm for sales, local station sales, and found somebody there who was the head of a research group, and she hired me on, thankfully. And one of the things that I took to right away was, obviously there's a lot of numbers and math and crunching data involved, which is not necessarily my favorite thing, but still interesting. So, but the thing I found more interesting was taking those findings and turning them into a story. So, because I've kind of always been a storyteller by nature, and to this day, the part of my job I enjoy the most is looking at those the data, looking at the numbers, and figuring out what's the story to tell here, and how do we help our clients do better based on that.
Sure.
So I spent a few months at Telerep. Obviously back then, this is the late 90s, entry-level salaries were not awesome, and I had a pretty hefty student loans to pay off. So I didn't stick around very long, and then I moved over to Initiative in 2000. And I have been in the IPG family since.
Cool. Excellent. So tell us a little bit about moving from Initiative to where you are now with MAGNA, and a little bit about your current role.
Sure. MAGNA was formed in 2001, and the main sort of goal of doing that at the time was to sort of consolidate our national TV spend and be able to kind of go to the market in a kind of collective bargaining manner. And
sure.
What started to form, around that was the centralized insights unit that provided those trends and the data to say, hey, this is where we should be investing. And a lot of the stuff I was doing at Initiative at the time was centered on TV. And so it was just kind of a natural progression that I move over to MAGNA, where this stuff was getting increasingly centralized, and since then, obviously MAGNA has evolved quite a bit. It's not just TV anymore. The world is not just TV anymore. And so we cover all media, and it's great to have been now looking at the bigger picture of media consumption and being able to write about it and kind of say this is where we see things going and help our clients, get in front of the people they want to be in front of.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that you have a background in writing. I think way back then, you wouldn't think that that would be the kind of background that would be good for, say, research. But now, with the importance of storytelling and being
Yeah.
able to package data in a way that's consumable, it probably has paid dividends for you, I would imagine.
So far, so good. Yeah, and hopefully it keeps you. I mean, I think obviously there's been an increasing focus on data in the industry, and I think of course it's important to have lots of data. But I've always been of the mind that the data you have is only as good as the story you can tell with it. So I'm hoping that I can continue to be useful for the foreseeable future.
Cool. All right, excellent. Well, let's talk about the cool stuff, man.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've had a chance to hear some of your stuff from your old band days, and it's really interesting. Very different from what you might hear from a lot of other bands these days. So super cool stuff, and a super cool name. So when you were starting out in your career, you would come home at the end of the day, and instead of just schlumping down on the couch and watching TV, you went to band practice. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so the name of the band was The Equation, which, as you say, for a data and
Awesome.
research guy, works well. And I think mostly came out of the fact that we were all a bunch of nerds, to be honest. And honestly, they had kind of my best friend is the bass player I've been playing with since I was 16. So he had kind of started the project with a classmate of his, and they asked me to join, after I graduated college, and it kind of took off, and those guys really definitely made me into a better player, and we were really into just creating fun music that we enjoyed playing, and of course the thing that set us apart, you mentioned it being a bit different, is that we were instrumental. So
Mhm.
no vocals ever, and yet a lot of the stuff that we played was pretty rock and roll,
Yep.
type stuff. But we heard more than once over the years, like, you guys got to get a singer, and we were like, no, it's not what we do, So we found ways to keep the shows interesting with stage antics and stuff like that, and we had a good run.
Hey, you know what? If you don't have a singer, then that's one less attitude to deal with, and that makes it a lot easier.
No, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I've certainly been in my share of bands with singers, and it's a different dynamic. But
Okay, now with the equation, you got to play the most iconic club in the world, probably. Just the most iconic club, and at a very weird time. So tell us a little bit about that.
yeah, so it was kind of the one of the highlights of our existence in the heyday, and that was we had played at the Knitting Factory when it was still in Manhattan. That was a really cool moment. But then, like, the kind of ultimate get was back then, and this is early aughts, CBGBs had like Monday nights they reserved for sort of auditioning bands to play.
Right.
So we took advantage of that. We played CBGBs on a Monday night. We had a great set. We loved it, and we were really sort of gung ho that it would get us another gig there, down the line, and seemed well received. The trouble that we faced was that this particular Monday was September 10th, 2001. So
Wow.
you can imagine that all of the stuff about the gig and everything kind of faded away pretty quickly the next day. So
Yeah, that's tragic, of course, both at large, but also a big bummer for your band.
yeah, it was, but we still get to say that we played there, which is great. And as I shared with you, the recording is online on YouTube for anyone that wants to hear it. So
Yeah, now you actually played multiple instruments, right? And what did you play when you were on stage at CBGB?
So I'm mostly guitar, but we had another guitar player who also played keys, and we had several songs that had two bass parts. So I would play second bass, if you would.
Isn't it like Spinal Tap? Spinal Tap had two
Yeah, a
basses
little
on big bottom.
Yeah, more than two if I remember correctly, but yeah, exactly. It was kind of that idea. But we would do a lot of bass harmonies and some pretty cool stuff. So I did dabble a bit in bass, but I was not in any sense a true bass player, but definitely picked it up from time to time.
Who really is? They're usually, guitarists that can't quite
It's
cut it.
true, but
I'm just
I
kidding. No.
no, I find a difference honestly. Somebody who started on bass is usually a true bass player. Like my friend has been playing bass since day one, and like he dabbles in guitar the same way I dabble in bass, but I consider him a true bass player for sure.
Cool, cool. And do you still play at all?
Yeah, so I joined a new project not too long ago called the 86s. It's much more sort of traditional than compared to the Equation. It's kind of the Stones meets the Stooges, a little like punky garage type rock. We do have a vocalist, but he's a great guy and a great collaborator, so no issues there. And it's been fun. And the other fun thing about it for me was, they had two guitar players, so they weren't looking for another one. They needed a drummer, so I sort of relearned to play the drums. I had taken a break from guitar in high school and picked up drums for a while, and I kind of revisited it for this project just because I really liked the music and I wanted to be part of it. Cool. And it's worked out well so far.
Great, great. Well, given that you were playing music while you were building your career, and doing those things in parallel, are there any lessons that you were able to draw from one to the other?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's two things that come to mind. I mean, if we think about the CBGB story, right? It kind of, and it's funny because these are two things that happened back then, but that have really come back to revisit me more recently. Is that, typically what we see in the research world is trends kind of take some time to unfold. Right. We see kind of things progressing over years or what have you. But I think what this year has taught us anything, and what, back then, that day, the next day taught us, is that things can change on a dime now.
Right.
And you have to be ready for it and kind of try and anticipate what that means. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely spent a lot of this year trying to help, our colleagues and clients, navigate the world of COVID-19 and the world that comes after ultimately. And then the other thing is, if you'll indulge me another quick equation story.
Sure.
When we were recording our demo in '99 in my drummer's basement in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, we had a thing that happened where we were recording, and all of a sudden we heard a really loud knock at the door and yelling. And my drummer went to answer the door, and he opens it, and the NYPD piles in with weapons drawn.
Whoa!
And we, obviously we were in shock, and they started shouting about guns, and we were like, "There's no guns here, just guitars," and and it turned out they had the wrong address. So there had been a report of shots fired somewhere nearby in the neighborhood, and they had the wrong address. And they showed,
oh my goodness,
wow. And it was so, scary at the time, but it happened so fast. It was really bizarre. But obviously, reflecting back on that now and recently, I was like, it didn't occur to me at the time, but if we were a bunch of Black musicians, that would have went down a lot differently. And and so it's something that I've thought about and has kind of helped me on the career front, in that I've kind of reinvested in the importance of thinking about multicultural audiences and Black audiences, and how valuable they are in Black-owned businesses, and how we need to rethink, the way we do business around that. And thankfully, my company is very, focused on doing better in that area, and I've been able to be part of that. So it's great.
Wow. Well, I guess it's useful to have personal experience like that really brings that home.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very, very interesting story. So you have been in the media and audience research space for quite some time, pretty continuously. So I bet you've seen a whole lot of change. Of course, there's been a tremendous change over that time, not just COVID related, but just in general. Just curious, what some of your reflections are about what those changes are and what the future might hold.
Sure. I mean, I think, it's the thing that comes to mind a lot because we spend so much time talking about video, is obviously, streaming becoming the go-to thing, right?
Right.
And, obviously the COVID and being locked down has kind of accelerated a shift that was already happening away from kind of the traditional way of watching TV and towards streaming. And I think another interesting thing that is kind of developing now is that, obviously we've seen people getting rid of their cable subscriptions, and they like the choice and the UI of streaming interfaces. And so, one thing that I've been predicting now for the past couple of months is, the cable model is going to change, right? So the cable industry has been fighting against going a la carte forever, right?
Right.
Retransmission fees is their bread and butter and all that, but I don't think they're going to have a choice at a certain point. So
yeah,
I think that's something to watch out for.
Yeah, definitely. So given that you work in media, and this is a podcast, of course, curious to know what media sources you turn to, whether they be podcasts or anything for inspiration, either personally or professionally.
Sure. I am going to do some shameless plugging at this point, if I may.
Please do. It's all good.
So our colleagues at the IPG Media Lab have a great podcast called Floor 9 that I would recommend to anybody in the business. They're a little bit more future focused, disruption focused than we are, and so really good insights to be had there, and they have some cool guests, so I would check that out.
Cool.
For anyone out there who likes to listen to podcasts to go to sleep, I know my wife is one. My colleague and friend Scott Elchison, who also works at the lab and does the Floor 9 podcast, has his own, which I think is ingenious. It's called T's and Z's.
Yeah.
It's meant to put you to sleep, and all he does is read the terms and conditions from various digital companies.
Oh my God. That's hilarious. It's genius.
Yeah, it's quite effective in putting people to sleep, I think. And he also does a cool TikTok series where he will say, cover like, hey, here's something in these T's and C's that I bet you didn't know you signed up for. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool stuff. Personally, I'm a big true crime podcast guy, so I like a lot of the stuff that Wondery does. There's a good one out of Australia called Case File. Yeah, so.
Cool. Excellent. All right. Well, if you've seen any of these podcasts, you know what this question is.
Yeah.
Because I gotta know. I just gotta know.
Yeah.
So you're stranded on a desert island, right?
Yeah.
3 records of your choice, and I'm really curious. I haven't heard some of your music. I'm really curious what your 3 choices would be for the records that would keep you company for the rest of your days.
Yeah. This was tough because A, I think if you asked me this question at a different point in my life, I'd probably have a different answer.
Yeah.
And B, we live in the age of the playlist where nobody really listens to albums anymore,
Yeah,
so
true. Yeah.
I tried to think of albums that I knew I could listen to back to front every time, and enjoy. So I came up with 2 kind of evergreen options, and then one that's a little bit more recent. So the first one I would say call out is Temple of the Dog. Which,
okay, interesting.
Was from the grunge days, and I'm a huge Chris Cornell fan. I was really, really bummed to see him go a few years ago, and I think that record is maybe him at his finest. And I was lucky enough when they did the Temple of the Dog tour a few years ago to see it at MSG, and it was incredible. So,
oh, cool. Awesome.
But yeah, that album is something I can listen to front to back every time and love it. Another record, and this one might surprise you, that I can listen to front to back every time and love is the Wu-Tang Clan's Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers.
Absolutely.
But I love
really,
that one.
Really creative. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I try to pick something a little bit more recent. I do have a history as a metalhead, so I do enjoy the metal. So Anthrax's most recent album, it's called For All Kings, and it's I possibly their best work in my opinion. It's an amazing record.
That came out in 2020. Am I not wrong?
2016 actually.
2016. Okay, yeah. So
yeah.
I just read it. I was just checking a list. Best thrash album by year since 1983, and they ranked that as the best of 2016.
Yeah, so, it's really good, and I actually was fortunate enough last October to go on the inaugural MegaCruise, which is an heavy metal cruise hosted by Megadeth. And
oh my god, that's so cool!
I saw Anthrax play, and some of my other favorite metal bands, Testament. They were incredible. So.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So I'm a thrash metal fan from way back. So
awesome.
I'm kind of an Anthrax fistful of metal guy. Total OG kind of stuff. But I love your choice, man. I love your choice.
Yeah. No, I highly recommend that for the metal fans out there. It's a great record.
All right. Cool. Excellent. Well, this has been a great chat, Brian. Really appreciate your time. Some really interesting insights about media and thinking about media and music and how all that works. So really appreciate your time. Great choices, and rock and roll.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here.